Our next speaker is Richard Gilbert. Richard has been an urban issues consultant since 1993, focusing on transport, energy, waste, and governance issues. He was a Toronto City Councillor in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s, and has also been an advisor to Post Carbon Toronto. Richard.
Thank you. I'm going to, in the brief time I have, quickly run down in order of priority the four main transportation issues, pedestrians, cyclists, transit, and then traffic generally and congestion. Say what I think has been wrong for the last couple of years, say what I think should be done, and then hopefully still be within my time. Pedestrian amenities are the most important thing. We are all pedestrians, or almost all of us are pedestrians. When you go to a city, you do not judge a city on the quality of your ability to drive around that city. You judge a city on the quality of your experience as a pedestrian. And we have failed miserably as a city in the last few years. The most telling example of that failure was the resignation a few months ago of Helen Riley, who's here in this audience, chair of the Council's Pedestrian Committee. And in her resignation statement, she said, "We have no advocates on Council." A very blunt statement. Look around us. Look around the condition of, just walk south of here and a little bit west along Queen Street, just east of University Avenue. You will see one of the busiest pedestrian thoroughfares in the city that is reduced to a width of less than 1.5 meters by obstructions on the sidewalk. On the other side of the road, there is no sidewalk at all. The city's taken it away. Temporarily, but this is the kind of thing. They've left space for traffic, but none for pedestrians. On St. Clair, which is a travesty for all sorts of reasons, St. Clair West, the biggest travesty of all, apart from the fact that over $100 million will be spent and it will not increase transit ridership one little bit, I'll come back to that. The biggest travesty of all is that for several hundred meters along St. Clair West in different places, pedestrian width is being reduced from what is now a very comfortable width to below the city standard of 2.1 meters. It is absolutely appalling what has been going on in this city in regard of pedestrian amenity. A parallel thing is pedestrian amenity because of the traffic around it. And this has not been on the city agenda, but should be, in terms of a slowing down of traffic, particularly in residential areas. It is a very different street if, as in many places in Europe and in Japan and in South America, the traffic is restricted to 30 kilometers an hour or less, 30 kilometers an hour or less on the residential street. 35 years ago, I designed the first traffic maze in Toronto, in the area bounded by Bloor and College and Bathurst and Spadina. And that was a response to one-way streets put in the 1950s and 60s so that traffic could speed through those residential areas more quickly. And the traffic maze was a partial success, and the speed bumps that have been put in elsewhere have been partial successes. But what we really need to do is to slow the traffic down. And I'm now inclined to think we should get rid of all these one-way street systems and really mess up our pedestrian our residential streets so that the traffic cannot move quickly. Cyclists. We've done a little better on cycling in this city than we have for pedestrians, but they do not get what they deserve in terms of the numbers of them. Spending a paltry few $1 million a year as opposed to the hundreds of millions of dollars a year spent on other forms of locomotion is simply not acceptable. One of the crying needs for cyclist amenity in Toronto was putting in a bicycle lane on St. Clair. And another travesty of St. Clair West is that there will be no bicycle lane there. I could go on more about that, but let's go to transit. Regarded as the big issue, My problem with transit over the last decades in this city is that we've been spending money hand over fist on projects that have essentially not increased ridership. The worst one of all is the Shepherd subway. The Shepherd subway, I am sure when the numbers are in, you will find in that general corridor, we have spent $1 billion to achieve essentially nothing. $1 billion of transit money to achieve nothing. Other boondoggles, the Spadina line, which was put in 28 years ago, and still it is possible to get a seat north of St. Clair West in the rush hour because there's not the development there. We spent transit money on accommodating motorists at Bloor Street on the Spadina line. In fact, the whole Spadina line, the ridership is the same now as it was before, and they want to duplicate that system on St. Clair. When we have our conventional model, such as we have on Bathurst, where streetcars actually move faster in a more congested street. And of course, there is the St. Clair boondoggle, which in my view, I represented a large part of that area for 15 years, will be the commercial destruction of that part of St. Clair. What we should be aiming to do in this city is to be able to run transit that pays for itself. And that may seem absolutely extraordinary, but it's done elsewhere in the world. Transit that does not require subsidy. Transit that has so many riders that over what is a reasonable amortization period, whether it's a subway or a light rail line or whatever, it pays for itself out of the fare box. It's run as a business. But to do this, you need density. To do this, you need thousands of people or tens of thousands of people living or working around subway stations. Not subway stations that are in the middle of low-rise communities, such as we have in almost every case outside the downtown in the city. Our planning in relation to transit has been appalling, and what we finish up with is the idea that we just have to pay money hand over fist for something that essentially, in a properly organized world, could pay for itself, and that should be our aim. And finally, congestion. People moan about congestion, but they would moan even more if we didn't have it. Cities with no congestion are cities in decline. We should be welcoming our congestion. Obviously, we don't want to welcome too much of a good thing, but we should be quite pleased that we have a busy enough city that it's a concern. In reality, if you look at surveys that are done of congestion around the world, Toronto comes very low. We were the 6th lowest in North America in the last survey. In other words, we were the 6th least congested major city. There are some issues. We should be paying more attention to how our commercial traffic does its business, our trucks and so on. We should give that a priority, as is done in Singapore, for example. And we should obviously worry about some hotspots, and we should certainly dig up our streets in a more organized way. But we shouldn't get over-concerned about congestion. It is among these priorities. It comes clearly after pedestrians, clearly after cyclists, and clearly after transit. And it's there. I first sat in this council chamber as a councillor 30 years ago, all but a few weeks, and since then we've made some progress. But since then, the issues that we face in this city and in this world have got much worse. And we have not made progress that is commensurate to the gravity of the issues. It's very encouraging to see the councillors in waiting here today who have signed the pledge or will sign the pledge, and to see so many people interested in these issues, and it gives you heart, and I hope the next 30 years will be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.